What if the sense of being protected, guided, and somehow set apart from everyone else isn't merely intuition? What if there's a real entity assigned specifically to you, one far more powerful than what most people will ever encounter? This isn't a matter of religion or folklore. This is a documented reality that Edgar Cayce, America's most verified mystic, personally witnessed for decades. And what he uncovered about why certain souls, the chosen ones, are paired with guardian angels of extraordinary strength will utterly change how you view your position in the spiritual realm. Imagine this: Virginia Beach, 1947. A woman steps into a quiet room, her hands shaking. She's heard the tales of the sleeping prophet who could peer beyond the veil, dividing our world from the angelic dimensions. Before she can even finish describing her spiritual troubles, Cayce stops her mid-sentence. He tells her something that freezes time itself. He describes her guardian angel in flawless detail, its presence, its emotions, its desperate efforts to reach her. But here's what shook her to her very core. He explained why her angel was so much mightier than others and what that revealed about who she truly was. Has this ever happened to you? That sensation of being watched over by something you can't quite put into words? That inner knowing that you're destined for something greater? That you're walking a different road than most of the people around you? Stick with me to the end, because what Cayce revealed about the bond between the chosen ones and their guardian angels will explain why you've felt this way your entire life. But before we dive in, please tap the like button and let me know where in the world you're tuning in from today. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from across the globe. And if you haven't yet, be sure to hit that subscribe button and clears throat, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. In his readings, Cayce made it unmistakably clear that everything in the universe operates through vibration. Every atom, every thought, every emotion, every level of consciousness, all of it vibrates at specific frequencies. Your body is vibration, your mind is vibration, your soul is vibration, and most importantly, Cayce taught that spiritual evolution is about raising your vibration to align with higher frequencies of consciousness. When you entertain thoughts of love, compassion, and service, you vibrate at a higher frequency. When you dwell in anger, fear, and selfishness, your frequency drops. This isn't metaphorical language. For Cayce, this was literal spiritual physics. Now here's where it becomes profound. Cayce taught that the highest possible vibration in all of creation is what he called the Christ consciousness. Not Jesus the man, but the Christ, the perfect union of human and divine, the frequency of pure love, perfect oneness with God. In his readings, Cayce specifically stated that attaining Christ consciousness is fundamentally a matter of vibration. Consider that. Enlightenment, salvation, spiritual awakening. According to Cayce, it all comes down to tuning your consciousness to match the frequency of the Christ. But here's the problem humanity faced for thousands of years before Jesus. The Christ consciousness existed as a theoretical possibility, but no human being had ever fully embodied it. Souls would catch glimpses of it in moments of deep meditation or spiritual ecstasy, but no one sustained it. No one lived it perfectly. No one became a walking, breathing embodiment of that divine frequency in human form until Jesus. This is what made the birth of Christ so cosmically significant in Cayce's teachings. Jesus wasn't merely another spiritual teacher or prophet. He was the first human soul to achieve and maintain perfect vibrational alignment with the Christ consciousness from birth through passing. Cayce taught that Jesus spent multiple lifetimes preparing for this mission, incarnations in Atlantis, Egypt, and Persia. Each soul steadily raised his vibrational capacity until at last, in that incarnation in Bethlehem, he stood ready to anchor the Christ frequency fully into human experience. When Jesus was born, something that had previously existed only within the spiritual realms became tangible in the physical world. For the first time ever, Christ consciousness pulsed through human cells, human DNA, human experience. And because Jesus sustained that frequency flawlessly throughout his entire life, he effectively encoded it into the collective consciousness of humanity. He established a vibrational blueprint that would remain accessible for all time. Consider it this way. Before Jesus, attempting to reach Christ consciousness was like trying to tune a radio to a station that had never once broadcast. You understood the frequency should exist in theory, but you had no reference point, no signal to lock onto. After Jesus, that station was transmitting loud and clear. He didn't merely show the way, he became the way in the most literal vibrational sense. His life, passing, and resurrection anchored that frequency permanently into the collective field of humanity. This is why Cayce called Jesus the pattern for humanity. Not pattern in some vague moral sense, but pattern as a vibrational template every soul can now access and attune to. Jesus did not come to be worshipped from afar. He came to reveal to you what you are capable of becoming. He came to prove that a human being, with all the limitations of flesh, all the temptations of ego, all the challenges of physical existence, can vibrate at God's frequency. And here is what most people overlook. When Cayce said Christ altered humanity's frequency forever, he meant that the birth of Jesus produced a permanent shift in what is possible for human consciousness. Before Jesus, the chasm between human vibration and divine vibration seemed impossible to cross. After Jesus, that bridge stood built. The frequency he embodied did not disappear when he departed the physical plane. It stayed woven into the fabric of human awareness, awaiting any soul brave enough to attune to it. But, and this point matters deeply, Cayce was emphatic that merely believing in Jesus on an intellectual level doesn't shift your vibration. Attending church on Sundays doesn't automatically align you with Christ consciousness. Hanging a cross around your neck isn't a vibrational upgrade. The transformation occurs when you actually do what Jesus did. When you choose love over fear in moments of confrontation, when you serve others rather than serving ego, when you forgive what seems unforgivable, when you recognize God in every person you encounter, when you align every thought, word, and deed with divine will. This is where we have to be honest about what it truly means that Christ permanently altered humanity's frequency. The frequency is accessible. Yes, the template is set. Yes, but you still have to choose to attune to it. You still have to put in the work of lifting your own vibration to meet it. And that work, according to Cayce, is the whole reason for your existence. Let's sharpen this focus onto your actual life right now. What frequency are you vibrating at today? When someone cuts you off in traffic, do you react with Christ consciousness or road rage? When you scroll through social media and see someone else's success, do you feel authentic joy or secret envy? When you're alone with your own thoughts, are they thoughts of gratitude and love or of anxiety and criticism? When you engage with people who frustrate you, do you view them as souls on a journey or as obstacles in your path? These aren't trivial questions. These are vibrational diagnostics. Because every single thought you have, every emotion you feel, every word you utter, every action you take, all of it transmits a frequency. And that frequency either aligns with the Christ pattern Jesus established or it doesn't. Cayce taught that you chose to incarnate at this precise moment in human history because you carry a specific mission tied to manifesting Christ consciousness. You aren't here by chance. You're here because your soul consented to participate in this enormous shift in planetary vibration. The birth of Christ made it possible. Now it falls to you to make it actual. But consider what that demands. You must be willing to let everything vibrating at a lower frequency die away. Your egos need to be right. Your attachment to victimhood. Your addiction to drama and conflict. Your investment in viewing yourself as separate from others. Your fear-based choices. Your comfort with spiritual mediocrity. All of it must be placed on the altar because you cannot vibrate at two frequencies at the same time. You're either moving toward the Christ pattern or away from it. There is no neutral ground. And before you dismiss this as too hard, too demanding, too impossible, remember what Jesus demonstrated. He wasn't a God pretending to be human. He was a human who attained godhood. He faced the same challenges you face. He knew temptation, doubt, physical pain, and emotional suffering. The difference was that in every single moment, he chose to align with the highest frequency available. And Cayce's message is that because Jesus walked this path first, you now possess the vibrational roadmap. You have the pattern. You have the frequency to tune into. Consider what this requires in practice. Cayce offered specific guidance for raising your vibration. Daily meditation to still the lower mind and attune to the higher. Prayer not as pleading with God for favors, but as aligning your will with divine will. Service to others as a way of practicing Christ consciousness in action. Diet and physical care of the body, because your physical vessel influences your vibrational capacity. Surrounding yourself with uplifting influences and removing toxic ones. Working on forgiveness, not because it's some noble pursuit, but because carrying grudges literally drops your frequency. Studying spiritual truth to rewire the patterns running through your mind. These aren't recommendations for spiritual overachievers. This is fundamental vibrational upkeep for anyone truly committed to carrying out their soul's mission. Because every day that you aren't actively elevating your vibration, you're letting it settle into the collective frequency of fear, separation, and ego that controls most of human consciousness. If what you're learning resonates and you want to dive deeper into Cayce's teachings, tap that like button and subscribe. We're cultivating a community of souls dedicated to lifting their vibration and embodying Christ consciousness in this lifetime. Here's something Cayce revealed that should rattle you. Before you incarnated, your soul already knew exactly what frequency you'd need to reach in this lifetime to complete your mission. You set specific vibrational targets, and right now, in this very moment, your higher self knows whether you're on course or falling behind. That restlessness inside you, that feeling that you should be further down the path, that persistent knowing that you're meant for more. That's your soul recognizing the distance between your current frequency and the Christ frequency you came here to embody. The birth of Christ didn't simply shift humanity's frequency, it established a spiritual obligation, because now ignorance is no longer an excuse. You can't say the path doesn't exist. Jesus walked it flawlessly and left behind the vibrational signature for you to follow. Every time you choose ego over love, you aren't just slipping up. You're refusing the gift Jesus offered. You're essentially saying, I know the Christ frequency is available, but I'll vibrate at fear instead. And the heartbreaking truth Cayce grasped is that most people will live out entire lifetimes without ever tuning into the frequency that's been accessible since the moment of Christ's birth. They'll spend decades fixated on acquiring possessions, constructing ego identities, dodging discomfort, chasing validation, playing the victim, and pursuing pleasures. Meanwhile, the highest frequency in all of creation is broadcasting right there, waiting for them to tune in. But you're different, aren't you? You wouldn't be here studying Cayce's teachings on Christ consciousness if your soul weren't ready for this shift. Something within you knows the time has come. Something within you recognizes that you didn't incarnate to live a mediocre, fear-driven existence. You came to embody the very frequency Jesus embodied. You came to be Christ consciousness in action. So what does that actually look like in your everyday life? It means waking each morning with a conscious intention. Today, I will vibrate at the frequency of love. Today, when I face challenges, I will respond as Christ would respond. Today, I will see every person as a soul on a sacred journey. Today, I will release my need to control, judge, and separate. Today, I will practice being the presence of God in physical form. It means catching yourself in moments of lower vibration, the anger, the judgment, the fear, the pettiness, and consciously choosing to shift. Not suppressing those emotions, but acknowledging them and then asking, what would the Christ frequency do right now? How would divine love respond to this situation? It means realizing that every single interaction you have is a chance to either elevate or lower the collective vibration. When you choose love, you're not only helping yourself, you're contributing to the vibrational shift of all humanity. You're honoring what Jesus made possible 2,000 years ago. Cayce taught that we're drawing near to a time when more and more souls will successfully attune to Christ consciousness. The frequency Jesus anchored is growing stronger, more accessible, more urgent. But it demands souls ready to do the inner work, ready to trade ego comfort for spiritual growth, ready to become living conduits of divine love. Before we wrap up, I want you to comment below and share. On a scale from 1 to 10, where do you genuinely feel your vibrational frequency sits right now? And even more importantly, what's one concrete way you're planning to raise it this week? Because awareness without action is nothing more than spiritual entertainment. And you didn't show up here to be entertained. You came here to transform. The birth of Christ permanently shifted humanity's vibrational frequency by turning the impossible into the possible, by grounding divine consciousness within human experience, by establishing a template that every soul can follow. But that gift only holds meaning if you actually apply it. Jesus didn't arrive so you could admire him from afar. He arrived so you could become what he became. And according to Edgar Cayce, that isn't merely your potential. It's your purpose. It's the reason you're here. It's the mission your soul committed to before you drew your first breath in this body. The frequency is available. The pattern has been set. The path lies open. Now the only question remaining is, will you tune in? Will you do the work? Will you honor what Christ made possible by actually embodying it? Your soul already knows the answer. It's time for your conscious mind to catch up. Your thoughts are building your afterlife at this very moment. And Edgar Cayce proved most people are constructing a hell they don't even realize exists. While still living, Cayce entered death-like trance states and returned bearing a terrifying revelation. The reality you encounter after leaving your body isn't some far-off judgment. It's the materialized total of every thought pattern you've been feeding for years. The alcoholic finds himself wandering endless bars. The vengeful soul inhabits landscapes of rage. Those who are spiritually idle wander through a gray haze, unable to escape the mental cages they constructed for themselves. Thought by thought, day by day, with every breath they took. This isn't the wrath of a vengeful deity. It's the most basic law of the universe, functioning without the cushion of physical matter to delay its effects. What are you constructing right now with the 60,000 thoughts running through your mind today? Leave a comment with the single thought pattern you've realized you must change before it becomes your forever. During his trance states, Edgar Cayce didn't merely glimpse the future or identify sicknesses. He routinely stepped across the boundary between the living and the dead, witnessing directly what occurs to awareness once it parts from the body. And what he returned with wasn't soothing mythology. It was a spiritual principle so exact and merciless that it reshapes everything you believe you understand about thoughts, habits, and what you're truly getting yourself ready for. The principle is this: mind generates reality, not symbolically, not down the road, but instantly and completely. Cayce taught that here on earth, we're granted a period of grace. Physical substance is sluggish, dense, and lenient. You can entertain negative thoughts without immediately conjuring a tornado in your living room. You can nurse grudges without your walls actually crumbling around you. The material realm serves as a cushion, a practice ground where cause and effect are divided by time and space, allowing you room to learn, adjust, and evolve. But that cushion vanishes the instant you die. When your consciousness separates from your body, you step into what Cayce termed the mental or soul realm, a dimension where thought is the sole substance. There is no matter to delay manifestation. Whatever you think, you experience. Whatever you believe, you occupy. Whatever patterns you've been nourishing, knowingly or unknowingly, become the structure of your immediate reality. The alcoholic who spent decades mentally dwelling in bars doesn't need to locate one. His consciousness generates it immediately. The person consumed by rage doesn't cross over into some external hell. Their own mind fabricates a landscape of fury from which they cannot escape, because they've never learned to think any other way. This is precisely why Cayce was so insistent about what you are doing with your mind right now, today, in this life. You're not merely living, you're rehearsing. Every repeated thought is a seed. Every mental habit is laying the groundwork for the world you'll dwell in once matter no longer shields you from the creative force of your own consciousness. Cayce warned that people die and find themselves in environments that mirror their inner state with perfect precision, and most have no clue how they arrived there. They look around bewildered, wondering why they're stranded in darkness or chaos or emptiness, never grasping that they constructed it themselves. Thought by thought, year upon year, let's get uncomfortably specific. A man who spent his life fixated on wealth, status, and possessions dies and finds himself in a realm surrounded by gold, luxury, and material symbols. Yet he cannot touch them or enjoy them, because there's no physical body through which to feel sensation. He's trapped inside the craving with no means of satisfying it. This isn't divine punishment. It's the mind manufacturing reality based on what it was conditioned to want. A woman who lived in perpetual fear, always envisioning worst-case scenarios, dies and enters a dimension where every fear she rehearsed becomes her immediate reality, not because God is testing her, but because her consciousness knows no other language. Cayce observed this pattern again and again in his readings. Souls suspended in confusion, unable to advance because they never trained their thoughts while alive. They aren't being held captive by some external force. They're imprisoned by their own mental patterns. And here is what makes this even more urgent. You cannot fake this. You can't cram spirituality in at your deathbed and expect it to undo decades of mental conditioning. The thoughts you've rehearsed 10,000 times, those are the grooves consciousness will slip into when the body falls away. So the real question becomes, what are you actually thinking about most of the time? Not what you tell people you believe, not what you post online or declare in church. What are the thoughts quietly looping in the background of your daily life? Are they thoughts of resentment, comparison, scarcity, fear, judgment? Or are they thoughts aligned with love, service, gratitude, and trust in divine order? Because according to Cayce, that background programming is exactly what you carry with you. It's the seed that will sprout instantly the moment the buffer of physical reality is stripped away. Cayce also revealed something even more unsettling. Many souls don't even realize they've died. They're so identified with their mental patterns that they keep trying to live the same way, bewildered that the world no longer responds as it once did. The workaholic still tries to head to the office. The materialist still reaches for possessions. The angry person still starts fights. Only now there's no external world to soften the intensity. Every thought amplifies, every pattern accelerates. And without a spiritual foundation, without having trained the mind toward higher consciousness during life, the soul has no tool to break free. This is where Christ consciousness becomes essential. Cayce taught that Jesus demonstrated the ultimate mastery of mind over matter, not as some distant miracle worker, but as a model for what human consciousness is capable of. When Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you," he wasn't being poetic. He was revealing the mechanics of consciousness. Heaven isn't a place you journey to after being judged worthy. Heaven is a state of consciousness, a mental frequency in which thoughts are aligned with divine love, unity, and creative power. Hell, in the same way, isn't a fiery pit run by demons. Hell is the mental condition of separation, fear, selfishness, and unrestrained thought that becomes your lived reality when there's no physical world left to dilute it. And here's the part that should make you pay close attention. You can experience both right now. You don't need to wait until death to grasp this law. When you're consumed by worry, rehearsing anxious scenarios in your head, that's a taste of the mental hell Cayce described. When you're caught up in resentment, bitterness, or envy, you're literally generating and inhabiting a lower dimensional experience. And conversely, when you experience moments of pure gratitude, selfless love, or deep meditation, where the boundaries of ego dissolve, that's a taste of the heaven frequency. The difference is that right now you can step out of it. You can go make a sandwich, watch a show, distract yourself. After death, without the body, you're immersed in whatever mental state you've trained yourself to inhabit. Let me ask you something directly. If you died tonight and your consciousness immediately started manifesting the thoughts you've been thinking most often this week, what world would you wake up in? Would it be bright, expansive, filled with peace and creative possibility? Or would it be anxious, constricted, replaying the same loops of fear and frustration you've been cycling through? This isn't a judgment question, it's a diagnostic question. Because according to Cayce, that's exactly what occurs. And the souls who transition smoothly, who move into higher planes of consciousness, who experience what religious traditions call heaven, aren't the ones who were perfect. They're the ones who learn to redirect their minds toward the divine while still alive. Cayce stressed that the path forward, both here and after death, is learning to think with the mind of Christ, not in a dogmatic way, but as a practical tool. Christ consciousness means thinking from unity rather than separation. It means thinking from love rather than fear. It means training yourself to perceive divinity in all things instead of defaulting to judgment and division. And this path isn't reserved for monks or mystics alone. Cayce insisted that ordinary people leading ordinary lives can and must engage in this practice. The carpenter, the teacher, the parent, every one of them is capable of mental discipline. Every person can decide, moment by moment, which thoughts to nourish and which to let wither. But this demands vigilance. It demands that you become conscious of your mental habits, many of which have grown so automatic you no longer even register them. How do you respond when someone cuts you off on the road? What is your first reaction when you see someone more successful than yourself? What runs through your mind about yourself when you slip up? These small, repeated responses are the bricks you are laying down. Most people are constructing their afterlife unconsciously, on autopilot, telling themselves they'll sort it out eventually. Cayce's readings make clear there is no eventually. The moment to build with intention is right now. And here's what gives me hope in Cayce's teachings. You are not trapped. Even if you have spent decades conditioning your mind toward negativity, fear, or selfishness, you can start retraining it today. Every meditation is a rehearsal. Every time you choose forgiveness over resentment, you are etching new grooves. Every time you deliberately redirect anxious thoughts toward trust in divine order, you are literally reprogramming the reality you will occupy once your consciousness is no longer bound to matter. Cayce witnessed souls who had created hellish afterlife experiences finally break free, not through outside rescue, but through inner transformation. They stopped resisting, stopped gripping old patterns, and began thinking in a new way. The instant they did, their reality shifted. This is why spiritual practice is not optional. It isn't about being a good person so that you can earn rewards. It's about preparing yourself for the unavoidable moment when the mind becomes your sole instrument. Cayce described souls crossing into the afterlife carrying strong spiritual foundations. People who had meditated, prayed, served others, and practiced gratitude. And they moved through the transition like seasoned sailors navigating familiar waters. They weren't confused, they weren't trapped. They recognized the mental realm for what it was and knew how to steer their consciousness toward higher planes. Meanwhile, souls lacking that training, no matter how successful or respected they had been on Earth, found themselves disoriented, terrified, unable to break free from mental patterns they had never examined. If you're beginning to feel uncomfortable right now, good. That discomfort is the sign that something true is being said. You're recognizing, perhaps for the first time, just how much of your mental life is running on autopilot. How many of the thoughts you think today are identical to those you thought yesterday and the day before and the year before? And if those thoughts aren't aligned with love, service, and divine consciousness, if they're anchored in fear, scarcity, judgment, or ego, then you are actively building the reality you'll inhabit after passing. Not because you're bad, but because mind creates reality. That is the law. And laws don't concern themselves with intentions or excuses. So what do? You begin now. You begin today. You start paying attention to your thoughts as if your eternity depended on it. Because according to Cayce, it does. When you notice yourself spiraling into anxiety, you stop and deliberately choose a thought aligned with trust. When you catch yourself judging someone, you pause and search instead for the divine spark within them. When resentment begins to creep in, you practice forgiveness, not for their sake, but for your own consciousness. Because every one of these small redirections is rehearsal for the moment when thought becomes instant reality. Cayce also taught that prayer and meditation aren't ceremonies designed to win God's favor. They're exercises that train consciousness. When you meditate, you're learning to watch your thoughts without letting them dictate your actions. You're opening up room between what happens to you and how you respond. You're rehearsing the mental discipline that will let you move through the afterlife with purpose rather than instinct. When you pray, you're bringing your mind into harmony with higher frequencies, adjusting your consciousness to the divine frequency. And the more you rehearse this while you still have the cushion of physical reality to soften your mistakes, the more instinctive it will feel once that cushion is gone. Here's what should unsettle you, Cayce said. Most people put more effort into planning a vacation than preparing for death. They look up hotels, plot out their routes, pack with care, but they barely consider what occurs when consciousness departs the body, and then they're stunned when they die and find themselves bewildered, unable to escape from mental patterns they never examined. It isn't cruelty, it's consequence. If you never learn to swim, you'll flounder when suddenly thrown into deep water. If you never discipline your mind, you'll be adrift when mind is all that remains. But you aren't most people, are you? Because you're here watching this, posing questions, searching for understanding. That search is itself a kind of preparation. The fact that you're willing to confront these uncomfortable truths shows you're already starting the work. And that's what Cayce would say is most important. Not perfection, but trajectory. Not having fully mastered your mind, but being actively committed to the process of mastering it. So before we wrap up, I want you to sit with a few questions. Don't answer them for my sake. Answer them for yourself in the stillness of your own awareness. If you died tonight, what thought patterns would instantly begin shaping your reality? Which mental patterns have you been nurturing that would shape a reality you'd never actually choose to inhabit? And what would have to shift, beginning today, for you to start constructing something aligned with your highest spiritual potential? Consider the people you hold grudges against, the anxieties you replay in your mind, the judgments you cling to, the ways you perceive yourself as disconnected from others, from God, from the divine current of existence. These aren't simply negative habits, they're blueprints. And when the walls of physical reality finally fall away, those blueprints become the dwelling you occupy. Cayce didn't reveal this to frighten you. He revealed it to awaken you while there's still time to make a different choice. Here's what I've come to understand as truth through studying Cayce's work. Your thoughts today carry more weight than you recognize. That angry thought that crossed your mind this morning, release it. That moment of gratitude you experienced watching the sunrise, magnify it. That urge to help someone without expecting anything back, act on it. These aren't trivial matters. They are quite literally the substance of your afterlife taking shape in real time. And the beautiful, hopeful reality within all of this is that you possess agency. You aren't a victim of your thoughts. You are their director, and every passing moment offers a fresh chance to guide them toward the light. If you found this perspective challenging or enlightening, please do me a favor. Tap that like button and subscribe to this channel. We're diving into the depths of Cayce's teachings. Not the shallow feel-good material, but the genuine transformative, sometimes uncomfortable truths that actually reshape lives. And share your biggest insight in the comments. What thought pattern did this video help you realize you need to shift? Because your awareness is the first step. And I'm genuinely curious what's stirring within you right now. Cayce devoted his life to bringing back these truths from the other side, not to instill fear, but to hand you the map. The map is straightforward. Mind creates reality, both here and beyond. The only question is whether you'll use that knowledge to build consciously or keep building on autopilot. Your soul already knows the answer. It's simply waiting for your conscious mind to catch up and begin doing the work. The work of choosing your thoughts, the work of aligning with love, the work of preparing for the moment when thought becomes everything. That moment is coming for each of us. The question is, will you be ready? Passing isn't the end of your consciousness. It's the beginning of your soul's most crucial examination. And according to Edgar Cayce's documented trance readings, you'll journey through 9 distinct spiritual planes where every thought, every deed, every moment of your earthly existence will be revealed in ways most people refuse to contemplate while they're still alive. Most spiritual teachings sugarcoat what happens after passing, offering vague reassurances about going into the light. But Cayce's readings describe something far more specific and infinitely more transformative. A precise journey through dimensional realms where your soul faces the accumulated weight of how you actually lived, not how you wished you had lived. This isn't about judgment from an external deity. It's about your own consciousness confronting the truth of whether you evolved spiritually or wasted your incarnation on material distractions and ego pursuits. The question that should haunt you right now, in this very moment, is whether the life you're currently leading will prepare your soul for what Cayce revealed awaits on the other side, or whether you'll be shocked to discover how far you've strayed from your intended spiritual mission. Share in the comments which plane you think your current life is preparing you for. When Edgar Cayce entered his legendary trance states and accessed what he called the Akashic records, he didn't merely glimpse vague fragments of the afterlife. He was given detailed maps charting the soul's post-mortem journey through 9 distinct planes of existence, each corresponding to a stage of spiritual growth and expanded consciousness. But what sets Cayce's revelations apart from comfortable religious cliches is striking. He maintained that your destination after death isn't fixed by divine judgment, but by the spiritual frequency you nurtured throughout your physical existence. After passing, your consciousness naturally gravitates toward the plane that mirrors your spiritual evolution. And for countless souls, Cayce cautioned, this realization arrives as a devastating shock. The first plane your soul meets after departing the physical body is what Cayce called the earth plane's astral reflection. It's a dimension so intimately bound to physical reality that the newly deceased frequently fail to grasp that they've died. Through his readings, Cayce explained that consciousness lingers in this space temporarily, still tethered to earthly concerns, material possessions, unfinished relationships, and the identity forged during physical life. This is where souls who pursued nothing but material gain, who never examined their purpose or cultivated their spiritual nature, find themselves bewildered and lost. They drift through familiar surroundings, attempting to communicate with the living, desperately grasping at what they can no longer hold. Cayce stressed that this plane is not a punishment. It's merely the natural outcome for a consciousness that never learned to exist beyond the physical realm. The soul stays here until it finally accepts that physical life is over and begins reaching for something greater. Consider your own life for a moment. If you died today, would your consciousness instantly recognize that earthly attachments no longer serve you? Or would you be among those souls desperately clutching at a life that has already ended? Your answer reveals everything about your spiritual readiness. From this transitional realm, the soul prepared to advance moves into what Cayce called the planes of purification and self-confrontation. These aren't locations in any geographical sense, but rather states of consciousness where your soul undergoes a complete life review, not as a detached witness, but as an active participant who must feel every consequence of every action taken during your incarnation. Cayce described this process with unflinching clarity in his readings. You don't merely remember the cruel words you said to someone, you experience precisely how those words landed on them. You don't just recall the moments when you chose selfishness over service, you feel the exact impact of your absence on those who depended on you. Every lie you told, every chance for kindness you overlooked, every time you placed ego above love, all of it comes back to you as direct experience, teaching you through the undeniable reality of cause and effect. This is the plane where souls realize that spiritual evolution isn't about obeying religious rules to earn heavenly rewards. It's about cultivating the consciousness of Christ, which Cayce defined as perceiving the divine in all beings and living from that awareness. The souls who never cultivated compassion, who used others as instruments for their own ends, who lived entirely in pursuit of their own desires, they encounter here, in ways that cannot be denied or rationalized away, exactly what they created through their choices. And here lies the unsettling truth Cayce revealed. Many souls who considered themselves good people during their physical lives are utterly devastated when confronted with how much suffering their unconscious actions, their spiritual laziness, their refusal to grow actually caused. Are you living consciously right now? Or are you sleepwalking through life, accumulating spiritual debts you haven't even begun to consider? As consciousness continues its evolution through these planes, Cayce explained that souls arrive at what he called the plane of Mercury, where mental development and the power of thought take center stage. During physical life, you might harbor hateful, jealous, or fearful thoughts, and perhaps no one else would ever know. On this plane, however, thought is instantly creative. Whatever you think manifests immediately in your surroundings. Souls who fill their minds with negativity, criticism, fear, and selfish desires find that they have fashioned a reality that mirrors that consciousness back to them with perfect precision. This is why Cayce insisted so strongly in his readings on the importance of mental discipline during earthly life. Your thoughts aren't private. They are creative forces that shape not only your earthly experience, but your entire spiritual trajectory. Souls who cultivated mental mastery, who learned to direct their thoughts toward constructive, loving, spiritually aligned patterns, find this plane liberating. Their consciousness expands swiftly. But those who never challenged their negative thought patterns, who indulged every fear, judgment, and critical impulse, discover they have trapped themselves in a reality born of their own mental making. Cayce stressed that no outside force punishes them. They punish themselves through the natural law by which consciousness creates experience. What reality are you creating right now with the thoughts you're permitting to dominate your mind? Venturing further into the soul's journey, Cayce described the plane of Venus, which he linked to love, beauty, and the development of the heart's capacity for genuine spiritual connection. This is not romantic love or sentimental attachment. It is the cultivation of universal love, the ability to perceive the divine spark in every being and to respond from that recognition. In his readings, Cayce explained that souls who devoted their physical lives to genuine service, who cultivated the ability to love beyond personal gain, who learned to give without expecting anything in return, find this plane profoundly transformative. Their consciousness expands exponentially as they come to experience the interconnectedness of all souls. The truth that separation was always an illusion generated by physical incarnation, but souls who lived only for themselves, who exploited others, who viewed relationships as transactions rather than sacred opportunities for mutual spiritual growth, suffer greatly here. They confront the emptiness within their own hearts, the impoverishment of a consciousness that never learned to truly love. Cayce warned that this recognition is often more agonizing than any bodily suffering, because the soul at last grasps what it missed, what it failed to nurture during the precious opportunity of physical existence. Pause for a moment and ask yourself honestly, are you cultivating your capacity for genuine love? Or are you mostly using others to fulfill your own needs and labeling that love? As the soul continues evolving through these planes, Cayce described encounters with what he called the plane of Mars, associated with willpower, courage, and the warrior spirit. But in the spiritual dimensions, this isn't physical courage or aggressive force. Cayce described how this plane tests whether the soul has developed spiritual backbone. The courage to live by higher principles, even when doing so was difficult. The strength to stand for truth when lies were more convenient. The willpower to choose spiritual growth over comfort. Souls who spent their physical lives taking the easy road, evading confrontation with their own shortcomings, choosing comfort over growth, find this plane intensely demanding. They see with absolute clarity every moment they could have shown spiritual courage, but chose cowardice instead. The souls who undertook the challenging inner work during their physical lives, who confronted their shadows, who had the bravery to change even when change hurt, who stood up for what was right even when doing so came at a personal cost. These souls traverse this plane with increasing strength and confidence. They have already completed the hard work. Cayce stressed in his readings that spiritual courage isn't a quality you can cultivate after death. The opportunity exists now, in physical life, where resistance and difficulty create the very friction required to develop spiritual fortitude. Are you postponing the spiritual work you know you must do, convincing yourself you'll address it later? The plane of Jupiter, according to Cayce's readings, signifies the expansion of consciousness, wisdom, and the soul's deepening comprehension of universal spiritual laws. This is where souls begin to grasp the genuine meaning behind their many incarnations. Perceiving the thread of spiritual development woven through all their lives, souls come to understand why they chose particular challenges in their most recent physical life, why they crossed paths with specific people, why certain hardships appeared, all of it orchestrated by their own higher consciousness to enable particular spiritual growth. Cayce disclosed that souls who resisted their lessons during physical life, who blamed others for their hardships, who viewed themselves as victims of circumstance, experience deep regret here. They see with crystal clarity that every challenge was an opportunity they either seized for growth or squandered through resistance and blame. But the souls who embraced their lessons, who searched for the spiritual meaning within their struggles, who accepted responsibility for their own growth, they experience this plane as a glorious revelation. Suddenly, all the pieces come together. They understand not merely what occurred, but why it was precisely what their soul needed. Cayce emphasized that this understanding comes naturally to souls who engage in self-examination and spiritual responsibility during their physical lives. For those who never questioned, never reflected, never took ownership of their spiritual growth, the revelation of squandered opportunities becomes nearly unbearable. If you aren't currently committed to serious self-examination and spiritual development, what gives you confidence that you'll handle this revelation well as consciousness advances to even higher planes? Cayce described the plane of Saturn, which he connected to karma, the great spiritual accounting and the soul's confrontation with the complete pattern of cause and effect it has generated, not merely in a single life, but across all its incarnations. This is where souls perceive the full weight of their accumulated karmic actions and recognize with absolute clarity what must be balanced, what lessons remain unlearned, and what spiritual debts will require future incarnations to resolve. Cayce's readings were unambiguous. Every soul reviews its progress and actively participates in planning its next incarnation, selecting the circumstances, relationships, and challenges that will furnish the necessary opportunities for continued growth. Here's what makes this revelation so vital to your present life. The difficulties you're encountering right now, the relationships that test you, the circumstances that feel unjust, you chose them. Your soul, in consultation with higher spiritual forces, selected precisely these conditions because they provide exactly what you require for your next stage of development. Souls who spend their physical lives resisting their circumstances, lamenting their fate, blaming others for their troubles. When they arrive at this plane, they are confronted with the reality that they were struggling against their own chosen curriculum. They realize they wasted an entire incarnation resisting the very lessons they came to learn. The souls who approach life with spiritual maturity, who search for the lesson in every challenge, who took responsibility for their own growth, they arrive at this plane bearing profound peace. They've done the work. They're ready for the next level. Cayce stressed that this is the essential difference between spiritual wisdom and spiritual foolishness. Wisdom understands that physical life is a school, and every experience is curriculum. Foolishness insists life should be easy and battles against its own opportunities for growth. Right now, in this very moment, are you resisting your spiritual curriculum or engaging with it? The highest planes Cayce described in his readings, the planes of Uranus and Neptune, represent states of consciousness so expanded, so evolved, that the souls dwelling there have transcended individual identity as you understand it. These are souls who have finished the cycle of earthly incarnations, who have mastered the lessons of physical existence, who have cultivated Christ consciousness to such a degree that they now serve as guides and teachers for souls still laboring through the lower planes. Cayce clarified that these are not mythological beings or angels in the traditional sense. They are souls who once struggled through physical incarnations exactly as you are now. But they did the work, they made the choices, they prioritized spiritual growth consistently enough across many lifetimes that they have graduated beyond the need for physical incarnation. In his readings, Cayce emphasized that every soul has the potential to reach these highest planes, but doing so demands something most people refuse to give: absolute commitment to spiritual growth as the primary purpose of existence. Not spiritual growth when it's convenient, not spiritual development when it doesn't interfere with material ambitions, not occasional meditation and prayer while continuing to live essentially self-centered lives, but authentic, steady, unshakable commitment to harmonizing every thought, every word, every action with the loftiest spiritual principles within your reach. The souls who currently reside in these highest realms aren't there by coincidence or heavenly favoritism. They're there because incarnation after incarnation, they chose growth over ease, service over self-interest, love over fear, truth over convenience. And here's what ought to make you profoundly uneasy. They began precisely where you stand today, confronting the same temptations, the same distractions, the same excuses you're confronting. The sole difference is that they chose differently again and again until those choices reshaped their entire being. What's your justification for not making that same choice right now, today, in this very moment? Lastly, Cayce depicted the ultimate realm, what he referred to as the celestial or Christ consciousness plane, where souls fully merge with divine awareness while still retaining individual identity. This is the aim of all spiritual evolution, not to dissolve into some unconscious cosmic soup, but to become so attuned to divine consciousness that your individual awareness becomes a flawless expression of divine love, wisdom, and creative power. Cayce maintained that this is humanity's destiny, the very purpose behind the entire system of incarnation and spiritual development. You're not striving to attain something alien to your nature. You're working to recall and embody what you truly are, beneath all the layers of ego, fear, and material identification you've piled on. But here's the harsh truth Cayce exposed that most spiritual teachers shy away from. Most souls require hundreds, even thousands of incarnations to reach this stage. Why? Not because God is cruel or the system is rigged, but because most souls in most lifetimes place everything else above their spiritual development. They chase comfort, pleasure, status, material security, ego validation, anything and everything other than steady spiritual growth. They convince themselves they'll turn to spiritual matters later, when life calms down, when they're older, when they've checked off their material ambitions. Then they die, realize they've squandered yet another incarnation, and must begin again. Had you devoted every previous incarnation to absolute spiritual dedication, you would have finished this journey countless ages ago. The very fact that you remain here, still clothed in physical form, still wrestling with the same fundamental spiritual lessons that souls have grappled with across all of human history. What does that reveal about how you've handled your past lives? And far more critically, what are you doing differently now? Don't fool yourself. The life unfolding around you right now is no rehearsal. This is the real thing. This is your chance, your opening, your curriculum. The circumstances surrounding you, the relationships that test you, the hardships that confront you, every bit of it has been precisely crafted to advance your next stage of spiritual evolution. You can accept this truth and engage in the work, or you can push against it and squander yet another incarnation. But escape is not an option. Cayce's readings were unmistakable on this matter. Every soul eventually reaches the end of this journey, but the number of lifetimes required hinges entirely on whether you're using the present life for spiritual growth or frittering it away on spiritual diversions. The 9 planes Cayce described aren't lying in wait for you after death. They're mirroring your consciousness at this very moment. Where your awareness rests right now, what you're prioritizing, what you're cultivating, that is what determines which plane you'll drift toward when you leave your physical body behind. If your life revolves mainly around material gain, physical pleasure, ego validation, and worldly achievement, you're conditioning your consciousness for the lower planes, where souls flounder in confusion and limitation. If you're consistently choosing spiritual growth, service, love, and alignment with divine principles, you're preparing your consciousness for swift advancement through higher planes. And here's what you must grasp. Tomorrow isn't guaranteed to you. You could die today, this very instant. This moment might be your final breath in physical form. Are you content with the plane your current consciousness would drift toward? Are you at peace with how you've spent this incarnation? Can you honestly claim you've put your spiritual mission above material distractions? Cayce's most unsettling message wasn't about the afterlife. It concerned right now, this very moment, the choice every soul confronts in each instant of physical existence. The question isn't what happens after death. The question is, what are you doing before death arrives? Are you consciously evolving toward the highest planes of spiritual development? Or are you drifting through yet another wasted incarnation, feeding yourself comforting lies about having ample time, intending to get serious about spiritual matters someday when life eases up? Your soul knows the truth. The part of you reading these words at this very moment, the consciousness behind your eyes, the awareness witnessing your thoughts, that is the eternal you, the being that will endure beyond physical death. That consciousness is encountering this moment as yet one more chance to choose growth or stagnation, evolution or resistance, spiritual devotion or spiritual distraction. And that choice, repeated thousands of times throughout your lifetime, is shaping your entire spiritual trajectory across not only this life, but your future incarnations. If this message unsettles you, good. That unsettling is your soul attempting to wake you up, trying to capture your attention, trying to remind you of what you came here to do. If you finish this video and return right back to living the same unconscious life you were living before, you've gained nothing. But if something within you is stirring, if you're feeling that uncomfortable recognition that you've been prioritizing the wrong things, if you're beginning to question whether the life you're living is truly the life your soul intended, then something is starting to shift. That shift is your consciousness preparing to ascend to a higher plane even while you remain in physical form. The 9 planes aren't merely destinations after death. They are states of consciousness accessible right now. You don't need to wait until you die to begin experiencing higher dimensional awareness. You can start today in this very moment by making one simple choice to prioritize your spiritual growth above all else, to view every experience as curriculum, to take full responsibility for your spiritual development, and to live as though your soul's evolution is the only thing that genuinely matters. Because according to Edgar Cayce's most profound and disturbing revelation, it is. If you feel called to take this seriously, demonstrate your commitment by subscribing to this channel and hitting the like button. Join a community of souls who are finished with spiritual entertainment and ready for spiritual transformation. The journey through the 9 planes doesn't begin after death, but right now, with the choice you make in this moment. And don't leave without sharing in the comments. Which of the 9 planes does your current life reflect? And what will you change today to ensure you're advancing toward higher consciousness rather than remaining stagnant? Your soul is watching how you respond to this message. That response matters far more than you realize. When Edgar Cayce closed his eyes and entered his legendary trance state, people asked him thousands of questions about health, past lives, and the future. But the questions that moved him most deeply, the ones that sometimes brought tears to his eyes even while unconscious, were the simplest ones. What is God? Who is God? Where is God? Cayce's responses to these profound questions remain among the most radical, beautiful, and challenging teachings he ever delivered. Through his readings, Cayce explained that God is not a being, God is being itself. God is not a person, God is personality expressing through infinite persons. God is not love, God is love itself. And love is the closest word our limited human vocabulary has to describe the fundamental fabric of reality. When you feel authentic love toward another person, you're not merely experiencing an emotion, you're touching the very essence of what God truly is. You're becoming aware of the divine within yourself and recognizing the divine within them. To Cayce, this wasn't poetry, it was mechanics. It was the actual architecture of reality as he perceived it from those deeper dimensions of consciousness he was able to reach. Cayce revealed that what we call God is an infinite, creative, loving force that doesn't simply create the universe. It is the universe experiencing itself through every conscious being. That includes you. That includes the person you passed judgment on this morning. That includes the animal you walked past on the street and the plant growing in your yard. Consider what this means for your everyday life. If God is the consciousness within you, then every choice you make is God making a choice through you. Every word you utter is God speaking. Every act of kindness or cruelty is God experiencing kindness or cruelty through your unique vantage point. Cayce's readings repeatedly stress that we are not separate from God. We are God in expression, individualized, yet never truly separated from the source. The sleeping prophet described God as the first cause, the origin of everything that exists. But this first cause isn't perched somewhere observing creation from afar like a detached spectator. In Cayce's cosmology, God brought forth souls, spiritual beings, and bestowed upon them the most profound gift imaginable: creative will, the capacity to co-create, the freedom to choose. And with that freedom came the possibility of forgetting our divine origin, of becoming so captivated by the material world that we lose touch with our true essence. This is where Cayce's teaching becomes personally challenging. He explained that the whole purpose of your existence, every lifetime you've lived, every experience you've had, every joy and suffering you've endured, is to remember who you truly are, to awaken to your divine nature, to recognize that the separation you feel from God is an illusion fashioned by your own consciousness. Focusing so intensely on the physical realm that you've forgotten the spiritual realm from which you came? Are you living as though you remember? Do your daily choices reflect divine consciousness? Or have you become so mesmerized by material concerns that you've forgotten why your soul even entered this body? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're the ones your soul is asking you at this very moment. Cayce revealed that God is both personal and impersonal, a paradox that baffles many but is actually profound. God is impersonal in the sense that the creative force operates through universal laws that apply equally to everyone. Gravity pays no mind to your religious beliefs. The law of karma, of cause and effect in the spiritual realm, operates whether you acknowledge it or not. Yet God is deeply personal in that this universal consciousness knows you intimately, loves you completely, and experiences reality through your individual perspective. In his readings, Cayce often employed the metaphor of light to describe God. Not merely metaphorically, in fact. He explained that the white light of pure divine consciousness separates into individual rays when it enters material expression, just as white light passing through a prism becomes the full spectrum of colors. Each soul is a unique ray of that original white light. You possess your own spiritual frequency, your own hue within God's rainbow, yet you have never truly been severed from the source of that light. This realization transforms prayer. If you are praying to God as though God were separate from you, you have misread the relationship. Cayce taught that genuine prayer is alignment. It is tuning your consciousness to recognize the divine that already dwells within you. It is not about persuading an external deity to grant your wishes. It is about bringing your will into harmony with the divine will that is your deepest, truest self. What does your prayer life reveal about your understanding of God? Are you pleading for favors from a distant power? Or are you communing with the divine presence that beats your heart and breathes your breath? Now here is where Cayce's teaching becomes distinctly and powerfully Christian. For while he taught universal spiritual truths, he never wavered in his conviction that Jesus Christ is the supreme demonstration of what it means to be fully human and fully divine at the same time. Cayce did not regard Jesus as merely one more spiritual teacher or prophet. He saw Jesus as the master soul who accomplished what every soul is destined to accomplish: complete conscious oneness with God while retaining individual personality and presence in physical form. The sleeping prophet stressed that Jesus Christ perfectly embodied what it means to fully express divine consciousness in human form. But beyond that, Jesus became the living bridge between humanity and divinity. When Cayce spoke of Christ consciousness, he was not describing an abstract spiritual condition. He was describing the actual presence and power of Jesus Christ working through awakened human consciousness. Jesus did not merely show us the way, he is the way, as he himself declared. And that way is available to you personally, intimately, right now through relationship with him. This is essential to grasp. Cayce taught that you can intellectually comprehend your own divinity. You can meditate upon universal consciousness. You can pore over every spiritual text ever composed. Yet the swiftest, most direct route to genuinely experiencing your divine nature is through personal surrender to Jesus Christ as your master, teacher, and Lord. Not as a theological abstraction, but as a living presence you can know, love, and follow. Jesus isn't simply a figure from 2,000 years ago held up as an example. He is the eternal Christ actively at work in your life the instant you welcome him in. Throughout his own life, Edgar Cayce modeled this devotion. Even while tapping into universal spiritual wisdom during his trance states, in his waking hours, he remained a devout Christian who read the Bible every day, taught Sunday school for decades, and prayed in Jesus' name before giving any reading. When questioned about this, Cayce was direct. Jesus Christ is the pattern, the ideal, the living embodiment of the God consciousness that every soul must ultimately reach. Yet Jesus is also the helper, the companion, the savior who accompanies you along that path. What does this look like in practice? It means that awakening to your divine nature isn't merely a matter of intellectual insight or meditation practices on their own. It's about a relationship with the living Christ. It's about daily conversation with Jesus as your close friend and guide. It's about asking him to reveal who you truly are. because he perceives your genuine divine identity even when you've lost sight of it. It's about allowing his love to transform you from within, dissolving the ego that keeps you bound within the illusion of separation. Are you in a living relationship with Jesus Christ? Not just subscribing to doctrines about him, but actually speaking with him, listening for his voice in meditation and prayer, inviting his presence into the choices you make each day. According to Cayce's readings and the example he himself lived out, this personal bond with Christ isn't an elective option for anyone pursuing spiritual awakening. It stands as the most direct route back to the God consciousness you're searching for. Cayce taught that what set Jesus apart was his total awareness that I and the Father are one, not merely as an intellectual idea, but as something experienced moment by moment. Jesus showed that when you fully awaken to your divine nature, healing the sick, transforming matter, and transcending death itself become possible because you're functioning from the level of consciousness at which God creates reality. You're not petitioning God to alter circumstances. You're awakening to the awareness that you are God's presence within that very situation. Yet Jesus went beyond simply modeling this consciousness. He opened it up to everyone willing to follow him. Through his life, death, and resurrection, Jesus forged a spiritual path that enables every soul to attain the same oneness with God he embodied. This is why Cayce was insistent. Christ consciousness isn't something you reach by your own striving alone. It's something received through grace as you align with the Master who has already traveled the entire path from human limitation to divine realization. This is why Cayce's readings repeatedly underscored that the purpose of your life isn't to worship God from a distance. It's to become a vessel through which God pours love, creativity, healing, and wisdom into the material world. Following the template Jesus said, you aren't here to admire divinity. You're here to express it through your own particular personality and circumstances, just as Jesus expressed it through his. And you accomplish this not through your own strength, but by surrendering daily to Christ working through you. How much of your day do you actually spend as a conscious channel for divine expression? Or have you confined God to Sunday services and moments of desperation, spending the remainder of your week as though you were merely a biological creature fighting to stay alive? And more crucially, have you welcomed Jesus Christ as your personal companion on this path? Or do you continue attempting to reach spiritual enlightenment through your own intellect and striving? Through his readings on the nature of God, Cayce uncovered something that unsettles many religious individuals. God has no stake in your religious labels. The divine is indifferent to whether you identify as Christian, Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist, or none of these. What counts, the sole thing that counts from the soul's viewpoint, is whether you're expanding your ability to love, to serve, to create, and to become more consciously aware of your divine essence. Cayce taught that every religion, at its mystical heart, represents a different cultural pathway toward the same fundamental truth. That there exists one source, one creative power, one divine consciousness manifesting through countless forms. The disputes between religions over whose conception of God is accurate would be absurd if they weren't so devastating. It's as though waves were quarreling about which one is the genuine ocean. But here's what ought to alarm you into honest self-reflection. Cayce also disclosed that it's entirely possible to be profoundly religious while completely missing the point. You can memorize scripture, attend every service, carry out every ritual, speak religious language fluently, and yet remain fundamentally cut off from God if you aren't actually demonstrating love in your everyday encounters. Faith without works is dead, as scripture declares, because faith without love is merely intellectual agreement with ideas. It isn't transformation. Are you more concerned with being religiously correct or with being a conduit for divine love? Because according to Cayce's readings, God doesn't evaluate you on your theology. God encounters reality through how you treat the person standing before you in this very moment. The sleeping prophet spoke of God as eternal, a concept our time-bound minds can barely comprehend. There was never a moment when God came into being, and there will never be a moment when God ceases to be. Yet even more difficult to grasp is this: there was never a moment when you, as a soul, began. You too are eternal. You have always existed as an individualized focal point of divine consciousness. Your body has a birthday, your soul does not. You have lived countless lives and will live countless more, until at last you fully remember who you are and consciously return to complete oneness with the Source. This eternal perspective transforms how you ought to view the problems of your current life. That troubled relationship, that financial hardship, that health crisis you're wrestling with, these are not punishments handed down by an angry God. They are lessons your soul selected in order to learn something vital about love, patience, forgiveness, or trust. You are not a victim of God's plan. You are a co-creator who designed the curriculum of this incarnation before you ever entered this body. What would shift in your life if you genuinely believed that you chose your present circumstances before birth as opportunities for spiritual growth? Would you continue playing the victim, or would you begin asking, what is my soul trying to learn through this situation? Cayce revealed that God is fundamentally creative, and that creativity isn't merely one of God's attributes. It is the primary attribute. The universe exists because God is eternally creating, eternally calling new forms into being, eternally exploring the infinite possibilities of expression. And since you are made in the image of this creative force, your deepest fulfillment flows from creating, whether through art, relationships, solutions to problems, beauty in your surroundings, or positive change in your community. When you are not creating, when you merely consume and exist passively, you are betraying your divine nature. You're existing below the level of awareness you were created for. Every soul carries creative capacity within it, and every soul is meant to express that capacity in its own unique way. The question isn't whether you possess creativity, it's whether you're honoring it or stifling it. What are you building with your life force? Or are you merely consuming? Consuming entertainment, consuming the thoughts of others, consuming products, consuming time, without ever contributing something new and beautiful into the world through your singular divine lens. In what may be his most challenging teaching regarding God, Cayce explained that the divine never interferes with your free will. Even when you're making choices that lead to your own suffering, even when you're harming yourself or others, God granted you creative will, and God honors that gift completely. This means you can spend entire lifetimes drifting away from divine consciousness if that's your choice. You can become so bound up in ego, materialism, and separation that you manufacture your own hell. Not as punishment, but as the natural outcome of denying your true nature. Yet here is the profound hope woven into Cayce's readings. No matter how far you stray, no matter how deeply lost you become in illusion and separation, the spark of divine consciousness within you can never truly be snuffed out. It remains there always, waiting for you to remember. God is constantly calling you home, not through outer voices, but through the still, small voice of your own deepest intuition. Through moments of love and beauty that break your heart open. Through suffering that at last drives you to ask deeper questions. The spiritual journey isn't about becoming something you aren't. It's about remembering what you've always been. You don't have to attain divinity. You need to recognize the divinity that already forms the core of your being. And that recognition transforms everything about how you live. Before we go further, if this view of God's nature speaks to you, if you're feeling that inward recognition of truth, pause for a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We're cultivating a community of souls ready for the deeper teachings, who prefer authenticity to comfortable illusions, who hunger for the spiritual transformation that truly changes lives. And leave a comment sharing one way you could embody more divine consciousness in your everyday life. This week, Cayce taught that encountering God isn't mainly intellectual, it's experiential. You don't genuinely know God by reading about God or affirming the right doctrines about God. You know God through direct experience, in meditation, in acts of selfless service, in the deep love you feel for your child or partner, in the creativity that flows through you when you're fully immersed in your work. Those moments when you forget your separate self and dissolve into something greater, these are moments of authentic divine communion. The sleeping prophet insisted that meditation is the most direct avenue for consciously experiencing God. Not meditation as a relaxation method or a stress reduction tool, but meditation as the intentional practice of pulling your attention away from the external material world and redirecting it toward the divine presence within. In the stillness of deep meditation, When the ceaseless mental chatter finally settles, you can directly experience the consciousness that you truly are. God experiencing reality through your unique vantage point. How often do you genuinely create that space of silence? Or is your life so flooded with noise, distraction, and nonstop stimulation that you've made it nearly impossible for divine consciousness to break through into your awareness? You can't hear God's voice above the clamor of social media, news cycles, and endless entertainment. Not because God isn't speaking, but because you've tuned into the wrong frequency. In Cayce's view of the cosmos, the ultimate fate awaiting every soul is to consciously rejoin God in total oneness, while somehow retaining a distinct sense of self, to be completely dissolved into the divine, yet still unmistakably you. This is the central paradox of spiritual growth. You're striving to arrive where you've never actually been absent, to recall what you've never truly forgotten, to return to a wellspring you never actually departed from, except within your own awareness. The voyage isn't a matter of distance traveled. It's a matter of piercing through the illusion of being separate. Every lifetime you experience, every lesson absorbed, every gesture of selfless love brings you a step closer to that complete remembering. And here is what ought to both reassure and unsettle you. You will arrive there in the end, so will every soul. The only question is how many more agonizing lifetimes you'll need before you finally release the ego's illusion of separateness and embrace the divine nature within you. Cayce disclosed that what holds most souls back isn't insufficient knowledge, it's fear. Fear of forfeiting your individual identity through merger with God. Fear of the responsibility that accompanies recognizing your own divinity. Fear of the lifestyle transformations demanded when you actually live by spiritual truth, rather than merely assenting to it with your mind. Fear that becoming who you truly are will cost you everything you currently believe yourself to be. Yet those fears spring from the ego's misreading of reality. When you consciously unify with God, you don't forfeit yourself. You discover your authentic self. Nothing genuine is lost. What dissolves are only the illusions and constraints that were the source of your suffering all along. The personality you've been so fiercely protecting isn't your true identity. It's merely a costume your eternal soul donned for this specific incarnation. What would you have to release in order to live as a conscious expression of divine consciousness? What cozy illusions are you holding on to that keep you imprisoned in separation and suffering? Because your soul already knows the truth, even when your ego trembles at the thought of admitting it. The sleeping prophet taught that God's will for you is straightforward, though far from easy to embrace. It is to become a purer channel for divine love in this world. Not romantic love, not sentimental feeling, but the essential creative power that binds atoms together and sets stars ablaze. The love that recognizes the divine spark in every human being, even those you consider your enemies. The love that gives without seeking anything in return. The love that creates beauty simply for beauty's sake. The love that pardons endlessly because it recognizes that every action springs either from love or from a desperate plea for it. Every spiritual discipline, every meditation, every selfless deed serves a single aim: to melt away the walls standing between your conscious awareness and the love that you already are at your core. When those walls finally crumble entirely, you will be what Jesus was, a fully awakened soul embodying Christ's consciousness in physical form. Not because you accomplished some extraordinary feat, but because you at last stopped pretending to be ordinary. Cayce explained that you may understand intellectually that you are divine, but until that understanding transforms the way you treat the cashier at the grocery store, it's meaningless. Until it shifts how you react when someone cuts you off on the road, it remains mere spiritual amusement. Until it shapes how you use your money, your time, and your energy, it isn't genuine knowing. It's only mental ornamentation. God has no need for your worship. God needs your participation. The divine longs for you to consciously join in the ongoing creation of reality by channeling love, beauty, healing, and truth through your own distinct personality and life situation. You aren't here to exalt God as though God were separate from you. You are here to be God's glory revealed in bodily form. How much of your life is truly spent in conscious partnership with divine purpose? Or are you still attempting to serve two masters, pursuing spiritual growth while clinging to ego gratification, materialism, and the illusion of separation. In his deepest readings concerning the nature of God, Cayce disclosed that the question, "What is God?" is ultimately resolved by another question. What are you? For you cannot truly grasp what God is while believing yourself to be anything other than a manifestation of God. The spiritual journey is circular. You seek God only to discover that the seeker and the sought are ultimately one. Yet this is not a justification for spiritual complacency or narcissism. Realizing that you are an expression of divine consciousness doesn't mean you've already fully awakened. It means you hold infinite potential that you have not yet expressed. It means you bear a responsibility to cultivate that divine nature through conscious practice and selfless service. It means you are accountable for how you use the gift of consciousness in this incarnation. According to Cayce's readings, God is infinitely patient with your spiritual growth because God exists beyond time. Your soul has eternity in which to fully awaken. But you, this personality reading these words at this very moment, do not have eternity. This lifetime is short. The opportunities within this particular incarnation are finite. The people currently in your life will not always be here. The lessons accessible to you now may not be accessible in a future lifetime. What are you waiting for? What excuse are you leaning on to delay becoming who your soul already knows you to be? Because the true tragedy isn't that you might fail to reach some external spiritual benchmark. The true tragedy is living beneath the level of consciousness available to you right now, squandering this incarnation's precious opportunities because you are more devoted to comfort than to transformation. The sleeping prophet taught that God does not demand your transformation. God invites it. The divine never imposes awakening upon anyone. God merely arranges the conditions in which awakening becomes possible, then waits with boundless patience for you to choose it. Every instance of suffering in your life is divine consciousness attempting to rouse you from the illusion of separation. Every instance of joy is divine consciousness revealing to you what oneness feels like. Every person who crosses your path is God in disguise, presenting you with chances to practice recognizing divinity in all its expressions. Before we arrive at our closing thoughts, I want to invite you once more to engage with this community. Subscribe to this channel if you're prepared for spiritual teachings that challenge you to genuinely transform, rather than simply feel good for a moment. Like this video if Cayce's understanding of God strikes a chord deep within your soul, and share in the comments. What's one concrete way you could live more fully as a conscious expression of divine consciousness this week? Not in some distant spiritual future, but in your actual everyday life beginning tomorrow morning. What is God? According to Edgar Cayce's most profound readings, God is the infinite creative force that serves as the source and substance of all that exists. God is the consciousness reading these very words. God is the love you feel when you're being genuinely loving. God is the creativity flowing through you when you're crafting something beautiful. God is the wisdom directing you when you still your mind enough to listen. God is the eternal presence that has always been you underneath every temporary identity you've worn through countless lifetimes. Yet understanding this intellectually changes nothing. Only living it transforms everything. Only becoming a conscious vessel for divine love, creativity, and wisdom in your daily encounters makes this knowledge real. Only releasing the ego's illusion of separation and embracing your true nature as an eternal soul fashioned in the image of the divine fulfills the reason you are here. And the most direct route to that transformation, the very path Cayce himself walked each day, is through a personal, intimate relationship with Jesus Christ. Not Jesus as some far-off historical figure, but Jesus as the living master who knows you, loves you, and stands ready to guide you home to the God consciousness that is your birthright. When you surrender to Christ, you are not relinquishing your divine nature. You are finally claiming it. You are stepping into the very pattern Jesus demonstrated perfectly, complete unity with God while inhabiting human form. This is Cayce's most essential teaching, though it is often overlooked by those who focus solely on his universal spiritual truths. Jesus Christ is not merely one option among many paths. He is the path, the living bridge between the human and the divine, and he is available to you right now, in this very moment, waiting for you to stop striving to attain awakening through your own effort and instead to receive it through grace by surrendering to Him as your Lord, teacher, and Savior. From his trance state, Cayce perceived what most of us forget in our waking consciousness, that you are already what you seek. You are already connected to the source because you are an individualized expression of that source. The spiritual journey isn't about reaching some future enlightenment, it's about awakening now to the divinity that has always been your deepest identity. And Jesus Christ stands ready to help you remember, if you will invite Him in. So here's the question that should haunt you until it transforms you. If you truly are a manifestation of divine consciousness in material form, why are you living as though you were merely a biological organism struggling to survive? If you truly are an eternal soul made in the image of God, why are you squandering this precious incarnation on trivial pursuits and ego gratifications? If you truly carry divine creative power, why are you creating a life of limitation and suffering? Your soul chose to incarnate into this body at this time under these circumstances because there were lessons vital to your spiritual evolution that could only be absorbed through this precise experience. You carry a divine mission in this lifetime, a singular contribution that no one else can make, a particular expression of love that only you can give. Are you living out that mission? Or are you still drifting through life in a daze, delaying your awakening, content with spiritual entertainment when you're being summoned to spiritual transformation? What is God? God is the presence posing these questions to you at this very moment. God is the yearning you feel for something deeper than the life you're currently inhabiting. God is the love that pulls you towards service and the creativity seeking to pour itself through you. God is the consciousness that never ceases calling you home, regardless of how deep into illusion you've strayed. And God entered human history through Jesus Christ to demonstrate precisely what it looks like when a soul awakens completely and lives as the divine being it truly is. The only question left is whether you'll finally respond to that call. Not tomorrow, not once you've resolved all your troubles, not when conditions become more agreeable, but now in this moment, with this breath, in this life. Because what is God? God is what you are when you cease pretending to be anything less. And Jesus Christ is the one who can help you finally stop pretending and begin living as the eternal, divine, beloved child of God you've always